to prepare your organization. We will follow that by in 2 weeks by how you take, once you've got your organization prepared, how you develop a fundable project, sort of the why, the what, the how to complete that project plan. And then in our third session together, we'll work on actually completing the application and managing your grant award. All of those help will be applicable both to the Community Foundation of Broward specifically, but also to other funders who you might apply to grants with. So we'll make sure that what we're sharing is both applicable to our work as well as other potential funders you may work with. You'll note in the chat, we will keep information flowing in the chat, but Lavani has posted the handout for today. You can download that and follow along on your computer. You can download it and print it, or you can just leave it sit there, whatever is workful for or helpful for you. But we like to make that available, and it's just a copy of the slides. We will also provide a copy of the slides with this handout in your follow-up email. So again, just letting you know kind of logistically how that will work. We will plan to take a break about halfway through our time together. So you can kind of plan on that. And I challenge you, while I know it's tough to do, I challenge you that as you can to sort of put aside other distractions that may be part of your typical day. I know in these virtual type programs, it's really easy to also keep the email open and also, do a couple other things on the side. We're all guilty of that. But I challenge you and encourage you to give yourself this time. Again, if you can, to really dive into this content work so that you can prepare your organization and yourself for the kind of work that we're going to be doing together. Now, just to give you another little bit of an opening here, really our purpose is not to replace other types of grant writing training. There are a lot of really great programs out there. Our Children's Services Council has a great program. Our United Way does some grant writing work. There are lots of Candid Learning Online has a great grant writing program. So this is not, don't plan to choose either or. Consider this a both and. This is a way to kind of get you started. And know that what we're doing is sort of a quick lesson to help those who are maybe newer to this process or new to the Community Foundation of Broward, even more experienced, but maybe looking just to kind of refresh your skills, just to kind of bring everybody onto the same page so you all are familiar with what we're looking for in the grants that we have available and generally how funders do this work. But here's my favorite thing to share with all of you. The thing to remember about Community Foundation of Broward specifically is that we are here to give you money. That is the purpose of a community foundation, is to raise funds from the community and grant them out through grant programs and gift programs. So you're not trying to convince us to do anything we aren't excited to do. What we're here to do today is to help you learn our process so that we can support and work together. Suze, you have a question. Go ahead and come off mute.
So I wanted to let you know that yesterday you guys sent a reminder for this session, but yes, in the reminder it had yesterday's for the AI class. It had that link. So
okay.
Yeah, so one of my coworkers, she was like, I'm trying to get on. I said I was too. So everybody's going through that link. So I just wanted to let you know.
Okay.
I just so happened to go back to an old email where the correct link is on the old email.
Gotcha. We've got a brand new system that we are still learning. So I thank you for giving us that. Lavani will send out a reminder right now to let everyone else know. And I appreciate that. Thanks, Suze. Yeah,
no problem.
It's a new system. We're still learning. We're super excited about it. But yeah, we've got a little learning curve left to go. So thank you for that.
You're
and
welcome.
for your patience. We'll get that right out.
No
I appreciate that. Let's see here. And in fact, oops, while we're doing that, let me see. I'm just making sure I've gotten everything that I wanted to cover. We are going to take a break about halfway through. We are going to do a couple of breakout rooms. Now, before everybody groans and rolls your eyes, I know those were cool for a minute. Now we get a little tired of them. But the whole idea is we're going to put you in a small group that we'll spend a little time shortly here, just doing a quick introduction of yourself and your organization. And then later, you're actually going to work together on some of the processes that we're talking about to give you that experience. So the whole idea is to really give you a small network of people to sort of share with as we go through this process. Think of this if we were in person, these are your table mates. So we will plan to do a little bit of that later. But what I would love to do, especially as we're getting a few more folks to join us shortly, is to get a little bit of a sense of who's in the room. So give me just a second here to see if I can launch our poll. So I'm going to go ahead and launch. There are 3 questions to the poll that just gives us a quick idea of who's joining us today. And it should give me a thumbs up if you're seeing that on your screen. Okay. Are you seeing the poll? There are awesome. Thank you, Patty. There are 3 questions that we want to know: the size of your organization, giving us an idea of the size of your budget, the kind of money that you bring in each year. The second is the age of your organization. Are you brand new just this year? Have you just been on operation a couple of years? Maybe you're more in the early stages with 5 years or less, and so on. And then your grant writing experience. So if you're new to polls, you should just be able to click on each of the answers, whichever answer is yours, and then submit it. We've got some more folks coming in now. So I'm going to leave this up for just a minute and welcome our new folks. And again, invite you to join us. We're excited to have you on board. Yeah, we got some folks that have been watching their emails, so thanks for the flexibility there. But yeah, go ahead and let us know. You can introduce yourself in the chat if you have not yet, and then let us know the answer to your 3 questions here. And we'll just pause for a moment to let everybody get a chance to do that. I'll also tell you while we're doing that, if you've got questions through the day, you can do this a couple of ways. You can put your hand up. There's a little toggle at the bottom that would give you a chance to raise your hand. You can physically have your camera on and raise or wave your hand, and we'll do our best to see you that way. Or you're welcome to pop the question in the chat, and we will periodically gather information from, and pause to take a look at the questions in the chat. So you were welcome to do that. Again, welcome to those of you. Sorry about that link change. We're glad to see that you're back with us now. We've got a poll going on the screen. So if you will share your experience, we've got organizations sort of all sizes. We've got some under 100,000. We've got some at that under 500,000. Under 1 million. Those are sort of common categories as we think about sizes and operations of organizations. It's interesting in the U.S. More than let's see here, more than most of the organizations in the U.S. and certainly most of the organizations in Broward County have budgets under 500,000. That's considered technically a small nonprofit. But we know, if you're a $50,000 organization, $500,000 seems miles away. And if you're a $5 million organization, that's a wide range as well. And looks like we've got a nice mix throughout our gathering here. So glad to have you all with us. Also looks like we've got people with a lot of experience in organizations. We have some brand new. Some that are under 2 years or in early stages under 5 years, and a few more that are, almost half of us now are in at least 10 years in operation. So glad to have that range as well. And then finally, your own experience. We've got some doesn't look like we have any veterans with us yet. We have some that have some experience, some are early stages, and some are brand new. So we're here for all of you and excited about that opportunity. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll for now. And yeah, I sort of shared out the results, so I'm not going to do that again. But I'll go ahead and get us started here, and as we're continuing to bring folks in giving you an overview of what we're doing today, kind of where we're going or what our pathway and plan is. Our start is to really talk about what organizational readiness means. We always laugh and share that, I've never met an organization yet who wasn't ready to earn money, right? I've never met anybody yet who said, no, I don't need any money yet. We're all ready. We're all in need of those funds. But preparing our organization to receive funding is going to be another aspect of the work. And so we're going to spend some time this morning really looking at what that means. And what I will share as we go through things like your mission and your history and your partnerships and collaborations and so on, I'll share what kinds of things that most funders, including in particular the Community Foundation of Broward, are looking for. And I'm going to tell you why, because you're going to find one of the things that we really kind of work through in this series is how important that why piece is. So we're going to spend a little time on that this morning, really defining what the need is. And here's a little preview. While we know that you all need funding to do your mission work, when you're talking about the needs of your organization and the needs of those you serve, the needs are not to get more money. We know that's what it's going to take. In fact, that's your solution to start implementing some of the work that you want to do. But when we talk about the needs, we're going to dive into what we really mean by that. And it's much more focused on the needs of your clients, of those who you are providing mission work to or for or with, and really thinking about how you help funders and donors understand that need so that they understand why you're the right solution for helping to meet that need. We're going to talk about what it means to demonstrate impact, and then we're finally going to finish the day really looking at a quick sort of formula that helps you build a fundable project. So that is our plan for the day. And I want to just start off, as I said, why is a really important piece of the work that all of us are doing. And we've got a lot of things that sort of drive that why. So I'm sharing with you here, this is my why, at least a big piece of it. These are the people that I do, that I love and care for. They are splashed all over the country. My daughter, my stepson, my stepdaughter, and those two shining new grandbabies that you see right there in the center. And the husband, yeah, he's part of the game too. But we are, these are all the folks that really give me meaning in my life, and I think it's fun to share a little bit of that, because we've all got the people that help drive us to do the things that we do. But the other piece of this is that you are also a big part of my why. I have been in the nonprofit space, doing work in this in the nonprofits for I did the calculations the other day. I think it's over 37 years now. Started my life as an elementary school teacher, raising money in a very rural part of Indiana to get funds and clothes and equipment and things that my students needed. And I've sort of been doing work in that space ever since. But what I have found over the years is that what truly, truly drives me in the work that I do is helping people do and realize and sort of accomplish the things they didn't know that they could. And that's a big piece of what drives me. So know that you are all a strong piece of my why, and that I appreciate the opportunity to spend time with you. So what I'd love to do now is to put you in some small groups and give you a chance to get to know each other a little bit with what I call your table mates, even though we're doing this in a virtual space. So we're going to spend about 10 minutes. And what I'd love for you to do, for each of you to do in your small group, is to introduce yourself, introduce your organization, and a little bit about what you do and who you serve. And then really that why piece, what drives you? And it might be professionally what drives you to do the work that you're doing, or it might be personally, or it might be a combination. But as I said, we're going to put you in some small groups. We're going to give you a chance to, like I said, about 10 minutes. So we'll come back. I have 9:20 now. We'll come back right about 9:30. And then we'll dive into some of our content. So any questions before we get started there? I am seeing and hearing none. So what I am going to do is put you in breakout rooms. And again, we've got about 20 people. So I'm going to build 5 rooms, give you about 4. Oh, we got one more coming in. Give you about 4 people per room that give you time to chat a little bit together. Hope you got a good chance to at least say hello, meet some new colleagues. What I find really fun and exciting about doing this kind of work together is to get to know some other folks who are doing, maybe the mission is completely different, or maybe sometimes it's, somewhat similar, but that a lot of us are still going through a lot of the same types of things. So again, any opportunity you have to connect with others in our space gives you another space to share ideas, to bounce things off of, to moan on occasion. There's lots of different ways that we can start to share together. So I hope you got at least an initial opportunity to do that. We'll be diving back into those groups with a little bit of what I like to call table work. I'm old school. I've been doing this a long time, so it's still in my mind, that opportunity to sit together and think through something in a small group. So we'll be going back to that a little bit later.
All right.
But glad to have you all back here. I'm going to jump back into our content. And again, make sure my screen is doing what it needs to. Give me a thumbs up if you can see, are you ready? Awesome. Thank you, Emily and others. Thanks, Tamika. Thanks, Frank. Great to see you, Frank. It's been a minute, but happy to see your face. Thanks for being part of us. Welcome to all of you. Glad to have you here. All right. So the question is, are you ready? Well, of course you're ready. None of us, as I said earlier, none of us are sitting around saying, oh, we've got a little work to do, but we don't really need money yet. We're just gonna think about it. I think all of us need funds to do the mission work and the amazing mission work that we're doing. And if we learned nothing else during the during the pandemic, it is that the needs did not disappear, right? Anybody finding no need to the services you're providing now? Yeah, nobody ever says yes to that. The need, sometimes they've changed a little, but overall, they have not diminished. And so, of course, you're ready. But what we're going to talk about in the next few slides here is making sure that your organization is well prepared and can share the story of your readiness and of the work that you're doing, so that donors feel confident in making gifts to you, whether it's through a grant at a foundation, or through a grant or a gift from a corporation or a company, or even donations from individuals, right? So there are some key pieces that we're going to walk through that will help you stay ready. And for those that are just able to join us, we did pop the handout in the chat. It is just a highlight of these slides. So again, you can download to use at your leisure. You can follow along if you like, whatever is most helpful for you. But I know some of you like to have a handout to go with the content. So it is in the chat. And if for some reason you're not able to get it, just pop us a message there and we'll try it again. But with that, I want to talk a little bit about this whole idea of readiness. And I want to start by helping work through the difference between a grant and a sponsorship, because a lot of times when we're talking to companies or foundations, we're asking for one or the other, and we're not always asking for the right one. So I want to just differentiate some key pieces here. When you're asking for a grant, you are typically not always, but typically that is in writing. There is some sort of a written format that you're following along. And you're looking to build a partnership with that funder. So if you are applying for a grant through the Community Foundation of Broward, you are hoping to or intending to build a partnership with us. And we would choose to fund your work if you align with our mission, because we have mission as well. If you align with the work that we're doing, and if you present us a strong case, we're looking for a partnership that likely is going to work over time. Grants are what we call operative. We are providing funding for you to do a thing, whatever that thing might be. It could be anything from, feeding 10 puppies to providing food through a food pantry. I must be hungry. I'm thinking of food at the moment. But anyway, or whatever the thing is, it might be hiring a part-time person, or it might be updating the technology in the nonprofit. Maybe you need a new computer, or or cameras for system delivery, or whatever it may be. But it is operative in that the funding is intended to do something that most likely has a start time and has progress that you'll make through that you'll report back to that funder. We're also driven by shared missions, right? That the Community Foundation of Broward has some specific mission areas. We are focused on education and youth enrichment. We are focused on social and economic mobility, broad categories, arts and culture, and the one healthy and thriving communities. Those are sort of our four large bucket areas, focus areas that we fund. A lot of things can fit under those things, but you want to, as you're applying for grants, you want to understand what the mission of that funder is, and then find how you fit to that. The project duration is anywhere from 1 to 3 years, most typically, sometimes a little shorter, but it's not just a one-time thing. Grants are typically longer duration, and you're usually going to be expected to do some sort of reporting on a specific set of what we call deliverables. That just means certain things are going to happen, and you're going to be able to tell us that they happened, right? The way in comparing that to a sponsorship, sponsorships are a little bit more transactional in nature. You are asking for a company or a funder to to put their name on the back of the t-shirt for the run, or to have their name featured at the gala, or whatever sort of event. They're very often event specific or project specific. And it's usually you give this funding to do this thing, and then you tell us you did this thing and everybody's happy, right? It's not necessarily a longer term partnership. It is more often just a visibility piece. It is often driven by the marketing of the company or the funder that you're working with. They're looking for opportunities to get their name out and affiliated with your organization or the mission or the audience very often that you're serving. And so there's a little bit more of a transactional approach to a sponsorship. Most typically the duration of a sponsorship is that one-time thing. Maybe it's the day of the event. It's the week of the food drive. It's the it's that sort of sponsorship. Their name goes somewhere. It's blasted out as part of that process, and then that event is done, and the sponsors are thanked, and you're kind of moving forward. They very often don't require any sort of reporting. If you get Florida Blue to sponsor your walk, their name goes on the t-shirt, they give the money, maybe they stand up at the event and welcome everybody, or have a little, they get to have a table or a booth, whatever that may look like. But at the end of that, they're finished, right? And they know how it happened. You might send them a picture or, a little thank you, maybe with everybody that attended to sign it or something like that. But there's not a metric-driven report for a sponsorship most of the time. It's really more focused on the benefits that that sponsor received and the benefits that your organization receives. Now, the purpose of both of these is to gain funding for your organization, right? To provide net revenue. But the differentiations there can help you start thinking about what is it you're looking for and who are the right partners to do that, right? So what I'll tell you is that the Community Foundation of Broward does not provide sponsorships, okay? We love that you're doing the walk or the show or the gala or the whatever the thing is that you're doing to raise money and raise awareness for your organization, but we don't provide money for sponsorships. We do provide money for grants. We're looking for that longer term partnership that will fund you for a year-long project. If it's your first time applying to us, a year is about as long as we will look. If you have applied to us before and been successful, then we may choose to offer you a 3-year grant. So that's delightful when you can get one of those, because that means you don't have to rewrite the application every year, right? That you know that funding is coming in for 3 years in a row. A lot of foundations are moving to that they call multi-year funding. So that's something you can start to look for. But it is very unusual for a funder to choose to do that if they don't know your organization and haven't given you a smaller or first-time grant first. So what you should hear from that is that if this is your first time with your organization working with the Community Foundation of Broward, don't apply for a 3-year grant, right? Just apply for a first-year grant. Let us get to know you. Let us get to know your work. Show us how amazing the work is and how strong you are at being able to deliver what you said you delivered. And then that builds our strength and our trust and that of other funders to help us decide, yes, we might choose to go ahead and offer a 3-year grant in the future. All right. So before we move forward, any questions or reflections about this idea of grants versus sponsorships? Feel free to come off mute if you've got a question, or you're welcome to pop it in the chat if that's more comfortable. Not hearing any. Chuck, did you have a question? I just see you're off mute.
No, not really.
Okay, that's all right.
I understand what you're saying.
Great. Frank, I saw you come off. Yeah.
Yes, I could just add that, I work for Slow Burn Theater and for the South Florida Symphony Orchestra, and both sponsorships and grants have proven to be a very valuable source of revenues. So
awesome.
Both of them need to be, we need to work both of those opportunities.
Yeah, exactly.
And I actually wear both hats. I work on developing the sponsorships and I work on doing the grants. So
yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that, Frank. And many of you are going to be in that boat where you're doing fundraising for a variety of types of fundraising. Some organizations may have just, a grant writer or even a grant writing team, but particularly those of you that are newer or smaller, that's probably listed in your other duties as assigned. And so it is good to know those key differences so that as you're out in the community, maybe you're attending a Chamber of Commerce meeting and you're talking with different businesses, you can find out, do they provide sponsorships? Then the kind of thing that you can invite them to participate in. Or do they have grant programs? And I will tell you, some larger companies have both. Most foundations don't. They will tell you pretty clearly what they're looking for. Like I said, Community Foundation of Broward does not put their name on events unless there are a couple of caveats there. If someone from the foundation is being honored, then sometimes they will buy a table or do a sponsorship in that way as part of a bigger grant program. But as far as, if you were to send us an amazing letter that says, we're doing this cool event, we'd love to feature you as one of the sponsors and all those things, it doesn't matter how amazing and cool and awesome it is, that isn't the way that we fund, right? And with that little bit of an exception. So it would be more important for you to understand how we do our funding, to understand our grant program, which we're going to dive into in depth over the next couple sessions, so that you know exactly how to get funding from our organization. And you know who and how to ask for what it is that you need. So again, it both can be strong pieces of the funds that you're bringing in to run your organizations year to year. But it is important to understand which is the most effective and which way a funder is looking to fund you, to know how to ask for that right type of gift or grant. All right.
I do.
So
have,
good
one
questions. Go ahead.
point.
Go ahead, Frank. Yes.
And I guess we really should minimize talking about sponsorships for the purposes of this webinar.
We're going to focus more, yes, on the grant prospect of that. Happy to answer questions and to tie, there are some gray lines in some cases, particularly when you're working for a for-profit business. You're doing, so you're going to a Florida Blue. I just talked to somebody from there yesterday, so that's why they're on my mind. Or a DeLuca Foundation, or some of those different organizations, but they might have some either sponsorship opportunities or specific grant programs, but they'll usually tell you that. So the key there, again, yes, we're going to focus more on the grant process than on the sponsorship process, but a lot of the things that you're doing, particularly this readiness piece, a lot of the things that you're doing to build readiness for funding will be important regardless of whether you're asking for a grant or a sponsorship. Does that make sense?
I would just say one thing regarding
Sure.
sponsorships. In the group that in my breakout session, we had Marcy and Tamika, and they both work for small nonprofits that don't provide that visibility that a sponsorship would provide. So, the sponsorships are not correct or are not applicable in a lot of cases. Because, if you want to get Broward Health to be a sponsor, they want big visibility. And so,
that's a great point, Frank. And that, as we, particularly in the next session, as we start talking about how we build our case for support and how we tell our story, that you may be very, you're right in that sense that someone like a Broward Health has very specific ways that they like to provide sponsorships. And they'll make that pretty clear for you. So you'll know if your organization is going to fit or not. But there are sometimes ways to help them see the value of being in front of the 10 families that you may be serving, right? That can make a difference. Sometimes the way that story is approached can help larger funders and larger sponsors see that there is value in also providing some funds for a smaller organization. So just know that is an option as well. But we'll talk a little bit more about that and about the whole idea of finding the right fit for your organization overall in choosing a funder. So great points. Yeah, excellent. So with that, and I promised as we, as there's an opportunity, if we're going to go through, I'm going to go through a series of slides and really just kind of share some information about each of the aspects of readiness over the next 30 minutes or so. So if you do need to give your eyes a break at this point, that's fine. If you want to hit your camera down, you can do that. What I will encourage you to do, though, it's really easy as soon as you do that to peek at the email and to peek at the other things and get all the distractions. So if you can still continue to grant yourself the time to listen in, to take any notes that you like, or to think about how this applies to your organization. That's not to say if you've got questions, you're welcome to pop off chat or pop off mute and jump in, or to enter your questions in the chat. Lavani and I can both see those. So and know that we're happy to pause and answer any questions. But again, I'm going to just be kind of working through some of this content. It's not as interactive as we do in other ways. So just a chance to give your eyes a break if you'd like. So with that, I do want to dive into all the different aspects of readiness. And this is really thinking about what does your organization have in place, and how easy is it for you to put your hands on it or your eyes on it so that you can have access to these pieces and parts. You'll see their puzzle pieces here. Remember, I started as an elementary school teacher, so I like pictures. And what we really are doing is looking at the various puzzle pieces that it takes to prepare your organization to be a solid fit for a funding opportunity, whatever that may be. And we start with some planning documents. Now we're going to talk through each of these here momentarily, but there are specific planning documents that it's really important to have and have access to, that are going to help the funder understand, who you are and how you're set up. Obviously, knowing and being able to share your mission, the history of your organization, your work. This is important to the Community Foundation of Broward, but a lot of funders are starting to be much more aware of this now. The work that you're doing in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in some cases, your organizations are 100% focused in that, which is great, which is fine. In some cases, maybe that hasn't been as much of a focus as work in other space. But certainly over the last several years, many funders have realized how important it is for us to provide funding in an equitable way to organizations who are strongly representing the values of the funders and of the people that you serve. So that is one piece that we look at. And again, we'll look at this in detail in a few minutes. We also love to know about your partners and collaborations. Now, for those of us that have been doing this work for a while, this is where we typically have a collective eye roll, in that, we know that funders love for us to collaborate, but sometimes that's really complicated. So we'll talk about what that means and what that can look like and some ways to make that happen, that in many cases you're already doing, maybe you just haven't documented. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. We need to know and have a good feel for your board, your staff or volunteers, whoever it is that's doing the work. And then there's a specific type of fiscal information, your finances, that all need to be in, I would just say, in good shape, and accessible for decisions to move forward with a funding invitation or a funding request. So let's dive into each of these sections. When we're talking about organizational readiness and planning documents in particular, these are the types of things that we're looking for. We want to know that you have a strategic plan, right? And that's really akin to a business plan, because at the end of the day, running a nonprofit is running a business, right? The difference is you're not providing profits to shareholders. You're putting those profits, those funds that come in, right back into the programs and services. But you're still running a business. There still needs to be a business plan in place. And in the nonprofit space, we call that a strategic plan, that looks forward into, here's what we're doing, here's where we're going, and here are some strategies we're putting in place or identifying in order for us to get there. What that tells a funder, what that tells the Community Foundation of Broward, is that you're prepared to be successful, right? You're right. Fabio notes that in the chat that there are some funders that will only fund an organization with a 501c3 letter. They need to have that letter. That is something that we'll look at as well at the Community Foundation. We don't always need to see that letter. We just need to see that you have the 501c3, and we'll talk specifically about what that looks like. Actually, when we're talking a little more about our candidate profiles, which we'll get to. But yeah, that is important. To your status is another key piece of your planning documents. Yeah. So if you have a 501c3 designation from the IRS for your organization, you will want to at least know where that letter is, and make sure that that's clear. You'll know because you're filling out 990s, for example, which is a government, the IRS document, the the tax form, so to speak, that a nonprofit fills out every year. And in fact, we will, the Community Foundation of Broward will look at your 990s. There's a place where they're all kept online. So it's not something that you typically have to send us. But we will take a look at that to see what your categories are, or what your status is. We look at your budget. What is your plan to run the nonprofit for the year? And what was the plan to keep it going last year? And we'll get into the very specifics of that as we go. But basically, we look at both your operational budget and your proposal budget. So two different documents, but that readiness piece is more your operational budget. What does it take to run your organization? And how do you have that plan sort of put into place, right? Now, for those, for folks in smaller organizations or startup organizations, I have often come across the question, well, when we get money in, we spend it. I mean, that's our budget, right? The money comes in, we get a gift from someone, and that means we get to feed 5 more kids, or we get to buy 10 more, t-shirts, or whatever it is that you need to do. But what we encourage, and what a funder is going to look for when you're starting to look for grants and often sponsorships, is that you have a plan for what that looks like and how that lays out, right? So go ahead, Sam, question.
So I work in a small department of a large nonprofit. And so when we're writing our grants, it's per department. So when we're submitting financials for the whole organization, I feel as a non-experienced grant writer that it's almost misleading to say, oh, we've got all this money, but really my program has 1/200th of it, and so it's, how does that, is there something we could do differently to show our financials, or, how can we express that our department is so finite compared to the overall picture?
Yeah. So great question, Sam, and a good opportunity for me to do a little myth busting. First of all, funders are not afraid to fund organizations with big budgets. That's not a detriment. That shows us that in the grand scheme, you've got a lot of pieces and parts in place, right? So we would want to see your full operational budget for the organization. There's a lot of different ways that lays out. But there would be an opportunity to also share in your case for support, which we're going to talk about a little bit today and a lot more next session. There's an opportunity to say, look, we've got all these great pieces and parts in place in this organization, but the need is this particular piece. And when we see that, then we say, okay, so they're prepared for success because they've got a lot of these pieces and parts in place. So don't let that be a fear. That actually can play in your favor. But when you provide the project budget and the case for support, that's where you'll explain this, while these funds are all dedicated for these things, what we're doing is proposing this because this need has been identified, and in our small section of this work, this is where the funding is needed. Does that help?
Yeah, that
okay
gives me a different perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, that was a myth for me a little bit at first too. It's like, oh, I don't want to show that we have money because then they think we don't need it. The funders don't look at it that way. Now, the opposite is true for those of you that are the opposite is also true. Those of you that are in brand new or startup organizations, your budget is, you're asking us for maybe half of the budget for the year, which is the max that, say, the Community Foundation will fund. We still want to see that whole layout. So we see what portion of it that we would fit into, and we see that you still have a plan to make things happen, right? So just because you don't have a large operating budget doesn't mean that we won't fund you either. That's just one indicator that shows us your organization is ready to receive funding and the work that goes with it, because you have thought through what your budget looks like, right? Liz, we were talking about an operational budget and then a proposal or project budget. And all that is, that's not really necessarily part of your planning documents. That's when you've decided what it is you need funding for, how that money is going to be spent, right? And we'll get into the very specifics of that in our next time together. We'll even look at the forms of what we're looking for. But what we're talking about as this readiness piece is that your operational budget, the budget that you're going to work from for the year, is ready and part of those initial documents. We're also looking for your EIN number. That is the number, and sometimes that comes on your a letter from the IRS that just says you're registered as a business. In Florida, we also have to register with SunBiz, which is a statewide organization or statewide program that tracks all of the nonprofits in Florida. So you've got to be registered with them. So you've got to have the right type of registrations. We also will look, or you need to have your bylaws handy. In order to form a nonprofit, you have to set up a set of bylaws that the board has voted on that are how you will operate. And if you don't have any of these documents in place and you need copies, that is something you can let us know, because we've got templates that you can, and a lot of them are already on our website, but we've got resources for templates that you could take a look at. But these are all the pieces and parts to have in place. We also want to take a look at your fundraising plan. Again, the plan is raise money to spend it, right? Simple as that. But what does that look like for you? How much money do you need to raise? Because maybe you're also providing services that that participants pay for, right? Maybe there's a sliding scale for the receipt of a certain service. So we want to know how you plan to bring money in outside of those fee-for-service type programs, right? We also want to see evaluation documents. We love that you're doing things. Maybe you're feeding kiddos in the summer, or you're providing a pantry for an area that in the community that doesn't have a lot of access to food, maybe a food desert space. We want to know what are you doing to help assess or evaluate that you're doing this work well, right? That might be surveys that you do once a year. That might be numbers that you're tracking. For example, the evaluation documents here at the Broward Center for Nonprofit Excellence include the surveys that you all fill out at the end of a class. So please do that for us. And the number of people that are participating and those kinds of things, right? So what type of documentation or proof do you have that the work that you're doing is successful, okay? And then finally, what sort of database or information system are you using to track your work? Not most, but many of us started, and certainly when I've started a couple of nonprofits, I started with Excel, where I tracked in the money that came in and the money that went out and the number of people that attended and so on and so forth. So I started in that simple format. If you're in the startup phases, that's fine. That's a place to start. But we want to know that you've got some sort of strategy to track information, and particularly these days, that you've got a strategy to keep that data and information safe, right? If we're providing funding to you through a bank transfer, we want to know that the numbers and the processes that we're going back and forth on, that we're safe in that process. So if you're using a database system, perhaps to track some of your donors or to track some of your programs, they may already have a lot of those securities built in. There's one that I can think of that's typical for small nonprofits or easy to use for small nonprofits is Network for Good. And I think it's a really, really inexpensive, in fact, I think there's a free version, database that you can use to track your activity with your donors and those kinds of things. And there are a lot of securities built into it. So we like to know that you've got a system in place to track and manage the work that you're doing. All right. And what all of these types of documents tell us is that you're prepared to be successful. And that, not unlike the question Sam asked earlier, in my early nonprofit days, I worried a lot about, well, if we look successful, does that mean we don't have need? And will they see us as, oh, they've got it handled, we don't need them? And the truth of the matter, particularly in grant funding, is that that is actually the opposite. The better prepared you are, the more excited we are to work with you, right? But we also know there's a lot of people in startup phases or in early phases of their work. And so one of the reasons we do this series is to help people understand how to get prepared, right? This also tells us, all these documents tell us that you will be able to report on your progress. Receiving a grant often comes with some assignments. It does here at the Community Foundation. We have a mid-year and a year-end report that we require. They're not complicated reports. They're based on exactly what you've told us you're going to do in the grant. But it does, by having all these pieces and parts in place, that lets us know you're likely going to be able to do that, right? Without a complication, without too much extra hassle. So helping you think about what is it that prepares us for success? How can we report? And how will we continue to do our work, right? While a lot of organizations start up with a little bit of funding, oftentimes funding out of the pocket of the person doing the work as a startup, and that's the way we get started. We want to know that there is a solid plan to continue. And in fact, even here at the Community Foundation of Broward, if your organization has not been providing services in Broward for at least 2 years, you're not yet eligible to apply for funding for us, right? That doesn't mean from anybody. There are others that will support new startup organizations, but a lot of established organizations and funders prefer an organization that's got a little bit of experience already. And it's because those are the types of organizations that have these pieces in place. Right? So if you are in a newer or younger organization, use this slide as a checklist. In fact, in the handout that we provided you on page 5, there's sort of a spelled out checklist that is like physically a checklist, kind of old school style. But it'll give you some ways, some things to look at to be sure you have in place for us. Luani just put that in the chat again, just in case you're not seeing it. So that you can take a look at that at a later point, so that you've got that sort of list ready. So one of the things we'll ask you to do later in our time together here is to sort of do an assessment of what do you have in place, right? If you're with a larger organization, and, in the example that Sam gave, that it's a large organization and her department is just a small piece of that organization. The chances that you have all these pieces and parts in place are pretty strong, but you may or may not know where a lot of those things are. And if you are going to be doing grant writing, you need to be able to put your hands on them, right? Or at least put your eyes on them, or at least know who can. So if you're in a larger organization, that's another strong, important piece to be sure that you can do, all right? So that's a highlight of the sort of planning documents that we look for specifically here at the Community Foundation of Broward, but pretty commonly with any other funder as well. Before we jump forward to the next piece, are there questions or additional thoughts on that you haven't shared yet? Feel free again to pop off chat, or I keep saying that, to pop off mute, or to put your question in the chat.
Hi, can you repeat what you said again about the organizations that are newer? You said something along the line that funding is not.
Sure, about the 2 years.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the policy at the Community Foundation of Broward is that we do not fund an organization that has not been in operation for at least 2 years, right? And the reasoning behind that is that we want to support existing successful organizations, right? Now, that doesn't mean if you're new you can't be eligible for funding when you reach that 2-year mark. The other little caveat on that is that even if you haven't had your 501c3 designation for that full amount of time, if you can prove that you've been doing work in the space for that amount of time, particularly here in Broward, then you can be eligible. So for example, let's imagine that a group of friends has gotten together and have been, feeding some kids in the neighborhood lunches through the summertime, right? And maybe they've done that. They did that last summer. They realized there's a pretty big need in our neighborhood for kids to get lunch, because maybe the parents are working or whatever the reasoning may be. And so now they've decided to form a 501c3. But because they were doing that work before they even went through that 501c3 work, we would consider that providing service, right? And we say that pretty generally, that you just need to be able to prove to us that you've been providing service. Okay. That's pretty broad. In the example that I'm using, what that could be, here's some pictures from the kids that came and had lunch. Here's 2 testimonials from a couple of families. We had 6 kids come the first day. The next week, maybe we just serve on Wednesdays, and I just happen to be familiar with the program that started that way. So maybe we just serve lunch on Wednesdays. The first time we had 6 kids. The next week we had 12. The following week we had 25. That's showing some need. That's showing some work, and a little bit of proof that happened. A picture of the kids in their cute little t-shirts or having lunch or waving or whatever. That we wouldn't publish something like that, but that would document to us that work had been happening, even though you maybe have not had your 501c3 yet. Okay. Right?
Does that also, what about the instance where, for example, for my organization, it was an LLC and is going to be nonprofit. So does the work that I've done within it being because it's been an LLC since 2019. So does that count?
It would. Yeah. As long as you can document that it's been along that same mission work, which it sounds like you'd be able to.
Yes.
Then absolutely. The other thing I will share is that you do have to have a 501c3 designation in order to get funding from the Community Foundation of Broward. But there is a workaround to that as well. Okay. If you do not have your 501c3 yet, you're in that process perhaps, or you're trying to figure out what that's going to look like. Yeah. You can work with what's called a fiscal sponsor, which is a fancy technical name for another nonprofit who has a 501c3, who we would grant the funds to, and then they would give that money to you to use. Okay. Does that make sense? Yes. That's the fancy version, that's the simple definition, I should say, of a fiscal sponsor.
Right. Got it.
So either of those options are possible. There are a few more things we have to have from the fiscal sponsor, but if that's the situation, then we can share what that looks like at a future point.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Good questions. All right. Well, let me jump us through a couple of more pieces and parts here of things that we look for as part of readiness. Is it the start or end of year 2? Good question, Tamika. We've been pretty broad on that. So ideally you've got proof of 2 full years. But if you're in year 2, I know we have a couple of times considered that. So, give it a shot, I guess is what I would say. And then if it turns out, if we've got questions early on in the process, and you'll see we have a lot of office hours and opportunities to talk to our grants team to find out those details. But it's not a hard and fast date. We just want to know that it's established work. So hopefully that helps that question. Good question. All right, so the next piece that we're going to talk about is this whole idea of your mission. To form an organization, you have to have a mission statement. We just want to know from that mission statement, why do you exist? Why is your work important? And how you match those areas that we fund. Remember, I shared those. And don't worry, you don't have to have them memorized. They're all over our website. If you go to Get a Grant, Community Foundation of Broward, you could Google that and it will take you right to our grant section that says, here's what we do. We even publish a document, and we're going to share that with you next time, but Lavani may be able to put the link in the chat for you. That is our focus area grant guide. And that will spell out everything that we do, everything that we're looking for. And a lot of funders do this. So determining how you match is going to be an important piece. And you can do that through the focus of your mission. And again, we just want to know that what you're doing aligns with what we're doing, right? And why we were established and why donors give us funding to grant out into the community, right? Those categories that we have are very broad, but there are a few things here and there that may not fit into that directly. And so we'd want to know that you fit pretty clearly, right? If you're applying to, again, I just talked to somebody at Florida Blue the other day. If you're applying to Florida Blue, they want to know you are focused in on the health aspects of the work that they're doing, right? If you're applying to the Chewy Foundation, which is the foundation arm of the company Chewy that does pet supplies, you're probably going to need to be working with animals, right? So it's helping us understand how you align, okay? In addition, we want to know a little bit about your history, right? We want to know when you started. We want to know why you started, what that purpose is, right? Back to that why piece. We want to know who you're serving. We use that term demographics, but that's really helping us understand, what part of the county are you working in? Or is it all of the county? Maybe it's a very specific zip code, or a municipality, as is in Fabia's case. Who is it that you serve? What area? What types of people are you working with? Is it low income? Is it children under 12? Is it people with disabilities? Who are the folks that you're serving? What current programs and activities do you have in place? What sort of recognitions or designations have you received? This is your chance to brag. And in fact, at the end of this 3-part series, for all of you who attend the full 3 parts, you will receive a designation. You'll receive a digital badge from the Community Foundation of Broward that you can put on other grant applications that you apply for, saying, we have someone on our team who is equipped to develop a grant based on having participated in this program. So it's the opportunity to share some of those recognitions and designations. And then we love to know how many people you're serving. That often brings up the question, well, if we're brand new and just getting started and only have, we've only served 6 kids this first time, is that enough? And it might be. Right? It's helping us see the whole big picture of what you're doing and where you are in the process helps us understand the history, and then again, looking at a larger organization that's been in play a long time, how long has that organization been in existence, and how many people have been served over the years. Remember, you are trying to help us understand how we would make a good partner for you in carrying out your mission because it aligns with ours. Right? It's thinking about how to make that connection. And what all of these sort of historical pieces and parts tell us is that you're not going anywhere, right? This is not just something you woke up one morning and said, oh, I think it'd be kind of cool to do this work. And so I'm going to do this for a little while. And then when I'm out of the mood, I'm done. That's not to say people don't do that and you can't do that. We have people that feed neighborhood pets, and it may never become a 501c3, but it may just be a hobby that someone enjoys doing. We love that, but that's not the type of programming that we're looking to support, right? We're looking for established organizations who aren't going anywhere, who have a plan to continue at least until the need is met, right? For many of us, that need is going to be going on a long time, but we'd love to see, we'd love to be around during that time. And really that helps us understand the impact you have in the community, right? And we'll talk specifically about what impact looks like at the end of our session today, so that you start to get a sense of what we mean by that. In addition to the history, as I said, we want to know what sort of work that you're doing in and around this diversity, equity, and inclusion space. The acronym that we use here at the Community Foundation, we call it READY, for Racial Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And we would look for things like, do you have a DEI statement? Does your organization have one? There is a template in your handout of what that could look like. It's just one example. We worked, I've pulled examples from a lot of different resources as part of doing this work and providing and preparing you for that. So that's just one example. I think this one is an arts organization's template. And it's on page 10 of the handout, just so you've got it there. But you can find lots of different examples of that if you don't already have one in place. And again, it just lets us know that your organization is doing something to support your staff, your leadership, your participants in providing and developing a more diverse and equitable and inclusive environment here in Broward County. That's very important to us at the Community Foundation of Broward. It is work that we are continuing to do and support. And so we just want to know where you are in that journey, right? And in that process. And again, that tells us that you've got, that part of your culture as part of that organizational, overall organizational culture. We're also looking for your partners and collaborations. We would be looking for things like, if you work alongside another organization, or just for a fairly simple example, if you are an agency that is supported through the United Way partnership, right? Then you probably have some sort of a document that says we are a United Way agency. United Way is one of our partners. They might provide some funding. They might provide some support. They might provide some training. Or maybe you've got an agreement with the Children's Services Council. And again, there's an agreement. You've attended some of their trainings, some of their work. So it talks about, we're looking for proof that you are working alongside other organizations in your space, right? In the space of the work that you're doing. Now, what if you're newer or you just have no idea who else is doing work in your space besides your organization? In that case, I would invite you to visit the Community Foundation of Broward website, specifically to the nonprofit directory. That is a space, and again, maybe Lavani, we can pop that link directly in the chat. But that nonprofit directory is part of the Broward Center for Nonprofit Excellence section of the website. And it's an opportunity that you can see every organization that is registered as a nonprofit in Broward County, right? And you can sort by who they serve or what areas of the community they serve or what their mission work is. You can kind of do a sort on that so that you have a good idea of who else is doing work in the space you're working. And what we need to know about that is that there is some collaboration, right? We wouldn't, as a funder, we try not to duplicate our services. So if there are 6 different organizations working to feed lunch to those same 6 kids in that example I was doing earlier, that might not be the best use of our funding. But if those organizations start working together, that might become a really strong partnership for us to support, to help all of you do that work. Or to help, maybe some other organizations in this partnership already have the way to do it and you don't, but you want to participate, then maybe that helps us understand what our role would be and that we wouldn't be duplicating our work, right? Now, that's not to say that, if you are with a food pantry, and we know there are a number of food pantries, a lot of food pantries in Broward, that doesn't mean that's duplicative unless you're serving the same group of people in exactly the same way, right? So, it's helping us understand that as well. But looking for, proof that you're working alongside, it might include, again, there's a sample MOU document, which is just a term for Memorandum of Understanding. And it simply says, hey, we're going to work together with this other organization, and together we're going to do these things. So, just some sort of document that says, yes, we are working with others. Or if you're not yet, that you've identified some organizations that you might connect to, right? Maybe you just need other organizations in your part of your community to refer people to you for your services. That's great. You can identify and come up with a strategy to work with some of those other organizations. Maybe you're both providing resources to each other or providing referrals to each other. It'd be that sort of thing. And again, at the end of the day, that just helps us know that you're connected to others doing this work. And we know how you're going to utilize the funding that we're considering granting to you. And the other reason that is so very important in Broward County is because when you look at that directory, you'll notice that there are over 17,000 organizations registered in Broward County alone as nonprofits. That's a lot, right? Now, that's not to say we don't have needs for those organizations to fill, but it does say that we have an awful lot of organizations that may or may not be working collaboratively, right? So you want to be able to show that you are, so that builds our confidence in saying, oh yeah, they know the space, they know the partners, they know the people that are doing work. They're part of that network of people and of providers. And that way we feel comfortable and confident providing that support to you to do the work. So if you haven't had an opportunity to do that, make a note to go back to that directory at some point in the next couple of weeks. Take a look at who those partners are. You might find people that that you might be able to do, to connect with. You might find organizations that you had no idea were doing work right down the street that might be able to connect. So just another piece of those readiness documents or that readiness preparation that funders will be asking you for. So you want to be thinking about how that comes together. A couple more as we kind of work through this. We're also going to ask you questions about your board, right? We want to know who is on the board of directors for the organization. And there are a couple things that are important. One of them is that you do have to have at least 3 members in the state of Florida to have a legal nonprofit board, right? And ideally, though it isn't illegal for them all to be family members, ideally it's not just family members, right? Now, for those of you in brand new startups, that may be the case. Let us know that. But the goal would be to expand into the community that you're serving to be sure that you have representation, whatever that may look like for you. So we would want to know how many members are on your board. We will ask you, what part of the community are they in? We'll even ask some questions about the demographics of those board members. And our application actually defines what specifically we're looking for and why. And we'll talk again in our next session together. We'll talk about a repository for all of that information so that you don't have to keep entering it in grant applications where it can just be pulled from. But we'll talk more about that later. We want to know how many of your board members are making financial contributions to your organization. That is a best practice that is not always known to board members when they join boards. They don't always realize they're supposed to be making financial contributions, but we do look for that. That is considered a best practice. And we have some separate training on board engagement and building your boards and those kinds of things. So if that's a concern for you, or if that's something you want to know more about, keep an eye on our website, on our training opportunities, and know we'll dive into that more deeply. We're also going to look at, we're going to ask specifically about the minutes of a meeting that you've held where you have adopted your budget. So as a nonprofit, you should annually prepare your operational budget, that document we talked about earlier and that we'll look at in specifics and details next session. And you should reflect in the minutes of the meeting that the board adopted that budget. Right? And it would say something very specifically like that. Some organizations are not real great about keeping those minutes. It is a requirement, but there also isn't anybody checking the 17,000 nonprofits in Broward every month to see that they're doing that. So prepare yourself for success in making sure that you do have those minutes of those meetings. And there is a template that you can use. Again, in that handout, I tried to get you the resources you might need. That particular template is one that I use. Last year, I served as the secretary of a local nonprofit board. And I followed that minute template exactly. So it's easy to do. You don't have to be super complicated. Remember, I started as an elementary school teacher. So if I can do it, you can do it. But it's an easy template to follow, that you would be able to do that. And all of those pieces and parts of the board help us as funders understand that your leadership, the organization, the people that own, so to speak, the organization are invested, they're active, there's a variety, there's a diversity, there's a good representation in serving the people that you serve with the mission that you have. So again, that's another piece of your readiness preparation. A couple more, and then I'll pause for questions before we get to our break. We also want to look at your staff and volunteers. Some of you have paid staff, some of you have unpaid staff, right? Or volunteers that are doing this work. One is not better than another necessarily. It just depends on the organization and the work and the people that are being involved. But we want to know what your landscape is. We just want to know who's doing the work, whatever the work is that's being done. We want to know what their skills and expertise areas are. That helps build that confidence in us as a funder that you're ready and prepared to do whatever it is that you're proposing in this grant application to do. We want to know how many volunteers you have doing the work. The more the merrier in many cases, but managing volunteers does take work. And so we want to know you're equipped to do those types of things. And it just really, it shows that you're invested in the long-term growth and success of the mission. Let me do another little quick myth bust here. It is absolutely okay and in fact important to pay staff members and to pay them well. Nonprofit does not mean no salary. It does not mean no good salary. It doesn't mean, under the cost of living. Now, many organizations are run by volunteers who are very dedicated to doing that. There's also nothing wrong with that as long as everybody is in agreement and the work is getting done. But there probably will come a time in the growth of an organization where that conversation around paid staff is going to be important. So know that we are not looking down on organizations that are paying their staff or paying them well. In fact, we encourage that. We are also able to support staff positions as part of a grant agreement or a grant proposal. So know that that is an opportunity. If that is the right next step for your organization in order to meet your mission, we could be a funder that could help with a full position. Little insider secret, while I could argue all day long on how important that is, that process is a little bit slower to be adopted in a lot of larger foundations. So I wouldn't propose the sole salary of a position coming from a foundation, but a portion of is going to be likely to be more successful at this point in time, right? We're working toward adopting a lot more of those operational funding opportunities because we know that's what you need. But at this point, the comfort is not in fully funding positions, at least in the long term, maybe getting them started. We're interested in helping you with, but you've got to have to build a plan to continue to support a position over time. So just a little insider secret there, or not really secret, but insider tip. All right, last piece, and we're going to talk briefly about this today. We're going to talk a lot more in depth in it next time. And this is your fiscal information, your finances, the money pieces that you have in place. Going back to that, do you have your 501c3 designation from the state or from your state funding and your and the IRS? Or are you in that process? And if not, do you have a fiscal agent, a fiscal sponsor identified who's going to provide that service for you? Again, we're back to those budget pieces. Do you have your organizational budget? How much that whole organization is going to spend and raise throughout the year and how that's going to be done? And do you have a project budget? And again, we're going to get into details of this next session, but that is simply telling us, okay, you may have, a $500,000 organizational budget. You're going to be asking us for, say, $50,000 for this particular part of the project. And what we want to know in a project budget or in a proposal budget you can use either term, is how are you going to spend that 50,000 if we were to grant it to you? How does that work, right? And what that tells us is that you have a plan for the way the funding is going to be used, right? We also look for, and this gets a little tricky, but we look for either an audit, meaning you have paid a company to come in and review your financials to give you a clean report, or a report that may have a couple of findings. That's just the auditor speak for, there's a couple things you should probably fix. But we look for an audit, or audits are expensive. We do know this. Some organizations have not done audits, but you can also do a financial review. And that actually is what my last organization did instead of an audit, because we were a new startup organization with a budget under 500,000 when we first started. And we worked with a CPA company who was, they were excited about our mission. They wanted to make a gift to us. And so their gift to us was their financial review, the cost of their financial review. So they did not charge us for going through our documentation. It was not a full audit, but it is another term that financial companies will use, is a financial review, where someone sort of voluntarily that is in the financial services business goes through and provides that review and provides you a letter saying you've had a financial review. Okay. Or if you don't have either of those and your organization does have a budget under 500,000, we will also accept your 990 document, right, as sort of your proof of fiscal information. And Fabio, I'll come right to you. What that 990 tells us is that, even if you don't have an audit or a review, you have your, I'll say this generally, your ducks in a row, right? You have your documentation, you have your information filled out and submitted on a 990 form. Now, one question that typically comes to that is, what if you're so small that all you have to do is fill out the postcard, right? Do any of you fill out the postcard for your 990s? It's an easy document for very small organizations to use that says, we are a 501c3, we've done this mission. It gives you answer a few questions, you send that in, and then they send you a card back that says, okay, we got it, right? We don't accept that as a financial or fiscal document because it doesn't tell us any financial information. So my advice, if you are not able to do an audit or a financial review, but you'd like to be considered for funding, but you only fill out a 990 postcard, is to go ahead and download the regular 990 form and fill it out, even though that's not what you submit, because that would give us at least an understanding of your organization's fiscal position, right? Ideally, again, an audit, but audits are expensive, or that financial review. But if neither of those are available, then your 990 or a 990 document can be accepted. Fabio, let me come back to you. Oh, I gotcha. Okay.
No, I'm good. Let me ask the question though. This goes back to the statement that I put in the chat earlier. I work for the city of Miramar, and we obviously do not have a tax exempt letter per se, one that is 501c3 letter. We did receive a letter from the IRS stating that as an organization affiliated with a state, county, or municipal government, or a government entity itself, that we may also qualify for exemption from federal income taxes, which we do. Yeah. In that event, does the IRS letter meet that requirement, or do we need to submit also the W-9? And then there's another question with that, and it's 990s. Obviously, the city does not have the complete 990. Yeah. So what
municipalities get special consideration is the easiest answer for that. And that's, I don't know that I know exactly what our documentation requirement is specifically for municipalities, but what I will do between now and our next time together is I will have that answer for you. Because our grant, I know we have funded municipalities in the past. There are some things that they ask specifically for. So let me find that out and we'll get that to you. Okay. Yeah, we'll make sure that you know it, because I know we have. All right. So with all of that, and again, what all those financial documents, that fiscal documentation shows us is that you have the tools and the preparation and the professionalism to manage the money that we're going to give you if we grant you those funds, and that you are accountable to the spending of those funds, and you'll be able to to show us how they were spent and prove that they were spent the way that you planned in the original proposal. So all of that is sort of the checklist of what you need to do or what you need to have in place to be ready for this work. So what I'd encourage you to do is just to take a couple of minutes and sort of assess your own evaluation, and you're not going to share this with anybody else at this point, of where you are right now today, right? How are you in your planning documents? Do you have those pieces and parts in place, or do you know where they are? Or do you know who to ask if you don't know where they are? Do you have are you clean on the mission and you be able to share that with others? Do you have your history information, or do you know where that stuff is, and so on and so forth? And just give yourself a 1 to 5 stars. 5 means, hey, we're rocking this. I can put my hands on all this right now today. 1 means, this was interesting, got a little work to do, or anywhere there in between. And with that, I'm going to give you a little time to do that and think about that. But we're going to go ahead and move into about let's do a 10-minute break. It'll give you a chance to take a break, rest your eyes, refill your coffee, all that good stuff. I have 10:40 on my computer right now, so we'll come back in 10 minutes at 50 after the hour, or 10 minutes to the next hour. So go ahead, turn screens off. We'll do the same here, but we'll be here if you do have any questions. One or the other of us will at least be here through the chat if you do have anything that you want to speak about while we're on break. All right, we'll see you in 10 minutes. Go ahead and get started and get back together. And as we do, if there are any questions or thoughts that have come up either as you've been listening or even during the break that you'd like to bring to us, any questions or reflections you'd like to make before we continue on?
You've been making reference to a handout, and I don't have that.
We put it in the chat. So if you open the chat, Lavani will pop it in there again. You should be able to click on it's a little document. You'll see it says Grants 101V for virtual. You see it there? And if not, Chuck, we can email that directly to you if you can't get to it on the chat.
I'm not seeing it here.
Okay.
So if you could email me that would be great.
All right. Well, Lavani will take care of that for us. Thank you. Are the rest of you able to get to the handout in the chat? Okay, thanks, Fabio. Good. I see some thumbs up. I appreciate that. All right. Well, good. Well, thanks, Chuck. We'll get that over to you. Any other questions or thoughts? Thanks, Owen. Things that we want to share? My hope is that you'll walk away today, from today, with a good, solid feel for what it looks like to have your organization ready for funding. What pieces and parts need to be in place. What ways do you need to start thinking about and sharing this organizational information for the great work that you're doing, so that it becomes comfortable for you, but also becomes easier for funders to see how they fit with you. And yes, the recording will be available. We'll send that out either at the end of today or tomorrow. It takes a while for the video to process. Oh, and absolutely, we had somebody, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. So let me do that, and then we'll put that, the 5-star rating, which is also in the handout. Let me get that. There we go. So those are the sort of the quick list of things that we talked about that help your organization demonstrate readiness, right? And as I said, also in that handout that we provided, There is a longer list of more detailed items that I talked or referenced to some extent, as well as some other resources. I tried to make sure I had some good examples of a lot of different things in those resources for you. So glad to put that information out there. I always warn people, I probably should have said that at the beginning here. I've been doing this work a really long time, but I wouldn't claim at any point to know all of the answers to any questions, but I know a lot of resources, and I usually do my best to be able to find either the resources or the people that can help you, particularly if it's not an answer that I know. So know that among other things is what I'm here to help you with. There's even an example of what a budget could look like. And again, we'll talk more about that in our next session together. So know that resource is available as well. And with that, let's dive into the other pieces and parts of readiness. You'll notice as we've talked, the first step in really developing your proposal is not necessarily finding the right funder or hearing that money, that somebody has a grant open or money to get, right? In fact, you really don't want to approach grant writing and project development that way. You don't want to create a project or a proposal just to meet the request of a funder or an invitation to apply. You'll hear that term sometimes. You want to be sure that you've developed the programs or the projects that first, and then find the right funder to fit them. That is going to be a far more efficient and effective use of your time, and it's going to make it a much less of a scramble in order to put a proposal together, right? And we'll talk about that again, the actual proposal creation over the next couple of sessions. But what we really want to start with in this process is understanding the problem, or in the nonprofit space, particularly among funders, we often say, what's the need, right? Or what's the problem that you are addressing? So many times when we introduce ourselves and our organizations, we start with what we do, right? Here's who we serve, here's the things, here's the projects or the programs. We don't start with what the problem is that we are setting out to solve. And to simplify, remember, fourth grade teacher, not brain scientist here. The fourth grade teacher version is that our brain science really tells us that our brains are looking for problem, solution, action pathways in anything that we do, right? We need to understand the problem, we need to understand the solution, and we need to know what we need to do, right? That's how our brains, in a very simplified fourth grade teacher version, are looking and building neural pathways. So what we want to do is we want to be sure we are defining that problem clearly for any type of donor, particularly in a grant application, so that the funder understands what problem we're addressing, right? So instead of saying we provide beds for people who are unhoused in this zip code, this many nights in a month or whatever it may be, you want to start with what is the problem that you're really identifying. So another example, we might say, we have a problem in that we need more equipment. Maybe we need more beds to provide our services. But really, that's not the problem, right? That's the solution to the problem. The problem is that there are people that don't have a place to sleep, right? So you want to start with that problem identification. And in order to do that, you can really kind of use these 4 questions as a guide, starting out with who you serve. Who are the people, in most cases, sometimes it's creatures, sometimes they're 4 legs or multiple legs, but who is it that you serve? What are the challenges or problems that they face? Why is that a need or problem for the overall community? And why does this connect back to a funder's opportunities, funding opportunities? So as we think about that, let's do a couple of examples here. Frank, do you mind if we talk a little bit about Slow Burn Theater? Are you willing to do that with me? Awesome.
Certainly.
All right. So start out by just helping us understand, who is it that Slow Burn Theater serves?
Slow Burn Theater serves theater goers, people who love live musical theater. But what specifically, we reach out into the community and have created a program called Elder Arts. And that is a program that serves the senior community of Broward. And very often they have been isolated due to their age, lack of mobility. And what we do is we go to community service centers and provide, our actors go and they'll provide a workshop that is thematically related to the productions that are happening at the time. And they will sing songs, they'll have music and movement activities, and it's been very, very well received. In addition, we provide discount tickets to the senior community, and those are at $10, just to make sure that there are very low barriers to participate.
Okay, so a couple of things. First of all, do you have a way to control your volume? Your volume is kind of low. I don't know if you could turn yourself up a little bit. If not, we'll do our best here.
Is this better?
A little bit. We may have to adjust our own volumes on some of our computers as well. But what you shared with us was a little bit about who you serve and a lot more about what you do with them, which is, there's not a wrong thing about that. But let me back us up a little bit. So if we're going to talk specifically about your seniors program, you are serving seniors is it a particular part of the community, or are you Broward wide?
It is Broward wide, but it is mainly what we do is reaching out to seniors who are seeking services at community service organizations.
Okay. All right. So see how, just in hearing that they are serving specifically seniors who are going to senior service organizations for services, that just changed the image in our minds from senior theater goers, right? Which I have a very different picture of what that might look like, to a specific audience within the senior population. So what you want to do as you're helping people start to learn about your organization is to be able to picture who it is that you're serving. And then specifically, Frank, that particular audience, what are some of the challenges they face? And you've mentioned a couple of them. You mentioned mobility, right? Give me a couple of other ones.
Well, memory is also a challenge. And mobility, they're isolated. So they face isolation, social isolation.
Okay. All right. So those are some of the challenges. Yeah. Right. So there's social isolation, anything, even hearing, possibly seeing, there's just some specific challenges that this particular audience faces. Do you see how we already now kind of get who's being supported through this program? A little bit cleaner than saying, seniors in the community, right? Or senior theater goers, right? In my mind, and just that brings a different picture than what you're describing, right? So we want our donors and our funders to understand who it is we serve and some of those key challenges, right? Now, the other piece of this, to really understand the problem that Slow Burn Theater addresses, in particular in this program, is why does that matter to the community, right? I mean, a senior who is isolated is a problem for that senior, perhaps, but why is that a problem for the community as a whole?
And you're asking me.
But just for some thoughts about that. Yeah. And if others of you have ideas, you're welcome to jump in as well.
Well, I think that it adds to quality of life for
Absolutely.
the community. And these are really, it's an underserved community that we provide these services to. And so when you help raise up this particular population in the community, you're helping raise up the entire community.
Right. And so you're starting to paint a little bit of a picture of that it's not just we saw a small group of people that weren't going to the theater and we brought them in. It's that there is an impact on when a lot of our senior population is isolated. There are impacts to the overall quality of life in the community. There's that decline in when they're not being stimulated, there's a decline in health. And I mean, there's some statistics you could play into some of that really starts to describe why this is an overall challenge. So many times, thank you, Frank, for doing that a little bit with me. I appreciate that, and doing that in front of our peers. So thanks for letting me ask you those questions. What this sort of, what this brings to light is that we do need to be able to think about that, because once we understand how is this a community problem, it makes it really easy for us at the community foundation to say, oh, okay, we should pay attention to this, right? Which helps to set you apart from maybe a lot of other organizations who are just saying things like, we bring people to the theater, right? Now I have a much cleaner picture of the specific program at Slow Burn that is going to engage seniors in experiential opportunities, getting them out into the community, getting them more comfortable, building their quality of lives, et cetera, et cetera. You can build that story to help us understand why this is a priority, right? And then again, depending on who it is that you're applying for funding through, you want to tie it back to their funding priorities, okay? Healthy and thriving communities is where we encompass a lot of our aging and senior care programming. And so that you would tie that back to how having a stronger community of seniors with less isolation, is strengthening the overall healthy and thriving community, in that, either in that area or in Broward. You would tie that back. Do you see how that plays together? And do you see how we have a cleaner picture now of what it is that, at least in the particular project that Frank was describing, of what that true problem is and how we might be able to do something about it, right? So problem, solution. He did start to say, and that's sort of the next step, what are we doing about that? You're providing these types of services, right? You're providing these experiences and so forth, right? What questions does that opportunity or that thought process bring up for anyone?
I would like to chime in. Questions about scope. Obviously, we need to be clear that we may serve people within a specific region, area, jurisdiction, for example. And then also in terms of how it is that the work is done through other partners or entities that we partner with. So that's it.
Right.
Thanks.
Yeah, excellent point. And you'll see how that starts to all tie together. But a lot of times when we start talking about our work, we start with that information. Here's what we do. Here's who we're working with. Here's what we want to do. But we've got to, if we go back to our brain science in that very simple fourth grade teacher version, we've got to really help everyone understand the problem in order for that solution that you're offering to make sense, right? Either clearly or at least by being able to infer or understand that, yes, if we have people with these challenges, this is one way to help them with that, with isolation. Senior isolation comes with a host of health issues and service challenges and mental health challenges. And so by eliminating or providing a solution to some of that senior isolation through these programs, the Slow Burn Theater is able to make some impact in that way. Okay, go ahead, Owen.
And it's also just like, if you are showing the problem first, then maybe your funders can even see like, okay, this is one way to do it. And if you add this, then we would be happy to fund you. Or if you add that, we'd be happy to fund you. Or other ways to go about a thing. If you just start with what you're doing, maybe it's hard to see the entire picture. But if you say, this is the problem, this is what we're doing, maybe that allows some wiggle room to say, if you tweak it like this, then we'd be happy to give you these grants, or so on and so forth.
Yeah. And there's sort of a wide range of the way funders approach that. Some of them are very interactive with you, do this, don't do this. In fact, we've even got some grants here at the foundation for some of our programming, in that we help fund through, where that's been exactly the case. We've really kind of worked together to figure out how we can collectively do this and fund this work. Others are a little less interactive, where there's just here's the process, fill this out, yes or no. But there's a range. And so understanding being able to clearly provide that path does give that funder an opportunity to say, oh, great, I see that they have thought about these things, or maybe they didn't know there's another organization doing this, and I'm going to make some stuff up here, Frank, but maybe Slow Burn Theater didn't realize that another entity was providing transportation for seniors to help combat some of that isolation, and maybe they could work together to get them transported to the theater. And again, totally making things up, but maybe Frank did know that. I bet Frank does know that, but maybe we at the foundation did know that because we've worked with some other organizations. And so we might be able to help make some of those connections as well. So that's a great point, Owen.
Or even something like, how it's worded right now might not be the perfect fit. But if you add, like you said, the transportation aspect, or if you add like this specific population, or if you add like one thing, then it fits perfect. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So, and that's the beauty of building this little camaraderie of our colleagues together here, is that sometimes if you can just get another set of eyes on your proposal, even before it's submitted, you can have some of those questions answered, right? That maybe, Owen, you've reached out to Frank and you guys have had a couple of conversations and you've read each other's proposals just for another set of eyes, and you've given each other a couple of suggestions that strengthen that application. That can be really helpful. So I encourage you to continue to use each other in that way as well. Because that can be really powerful. But then the staff here at the foundation can also assist with that. And in fact, we have office hours. Our grants team is online every other week, usually on Wednesday mornings. We've had to move them this week in our next couple of sessions. But we're online to answer any questions or assist with any of that kind of stuff as you go through the process. So you can keep that in mind as well. Emily, you came off mute. Is something you want to add, or question?
Not so much a question, but just to add to being a part of the senior population myself, I think a lot of times it's pretty simple as far as just to have something to look forward to. A lot of seniors have absolutely nothing to look forward to. And like you had mentioned, they're lonely. And then it allows them the opportunity to establish relationships and community of their own.
Yes.
So that might be something else that Frank could add to is senior population tends to be a lot like our younger population in elementary school, also an elementary school teacher, so I understand. They just want to be heard, listened to, and get involved in something that then they create their own community and their own family.
Yeah, yeah. So see, we just strengthened this. Go ahead, Frank.
It is exactly what has happened. We have groups of seniors who now are a cohesive, tightly knit group. Now they, in addition to going to the theater, in addition to going to the workshops, they're going out and about together as a group. Yeah. So it has helped form these cohesive groups. So that's a very good observation.
Yeah. So just in that little conversation, we were able to help strengthen a little bit of the way that Frank might tell his story, simply by really thinking through these questions. So use these questions as much as you can to help really devise and create your own problem statement, right? You'll hear this called the problem of need, the needs statement. The challenge, people use different terms in applications for you to share this story. But just know when you're starting with, who you are and what you do, start with who you serve and really defining that need. And that helps people make that natural pathway from the problem to the solution, right? So good. Well, thank you, Frank, for working on that. Let's see. I heard somebody else off. Go ahead, Yvonne.
Yes. Well, this was really important for us. The public that we serve is the opposite of seniors. We serve teens with cancer.
Okay.
But really helped me to link it to being a problem to the community or in the community. Right. Because usually the reply we get, okay, that's a problem for the teen who is ill and his family, but how is that linked to the community? So I thought that aspect was really important because in our case, we're working with mental health, with quality of life and all of that, but usually people don't understand it as being a problem in the community, but just an individual or a personal problem. So that was an interesting aspect for us to consider at Forza.
Yeah. Good. I'm glad that was helpful. Yeah, it really is. And like I said, it goes back to brain science. It's when our brains understand the problem and how it ties to, more than just say that one person or that one family with a child with cancer. Not that that's not a big challenge, but what does that impact look like in the community? Well, there are community impacts in that case, and so you can share those so that people really understand, what the impact and why we should help you continue on this work, right? This path. So great comments. Well, thank you all for adding in some good information like that, and giving us sort of a live example to play with. That is a key piece of this process, is really defining that. And I want to sort of move us to the next step, which once we sort of define that broadly for our organization, and then even more specifically into some of the different programs or activities that we're doing, is really thinking about, okay, if we have this problem identified, then what, right? Well, now we propose the solution. These are the things that we do. And you want to have sort of these 4 categories of solutions, of the solutions you're providing to the plan. This might be, you'll see this on some applications as the project plan. You'll see others of your proposed solution or even your proposal. You'll hear all those different terms. But ultimately, you want to be able to think about what is it that we are going to do for these particular people we've identified facing these particular challenges that impact the entire community, right? And so again, and it's back to that brain science of those brains problem, then solution, then action. So we want to start with our goals. The solution is the thing that we're going to do, which is usually what we focus on, and those are typically the activities. To just continue to play with Frank's example, the activities are that they get seniors the opportunity to participate, to come to the workshops, to sing together, to engage together, to build a little bit of that community. But what's the goal of that? And Frank, you don't have to come off mute for this, but we'll just kind of use this as we think through it. But what you want to do is, first of all, in your solution, you want to think about the goal or prediction of what's going to be different, right? Bringing people together for this, theater experience will do these things. It will, build these networks of people that rely on each other. They may, it will lessen their isolation because, to Emily's point and others, that there are more opportunities to get out and go do things together. They have a network of people, et cetera, et cetera. So you want to list those goals of what's going to happen as a result, as part of that initial solution. And in our next session together, we're going to use a tool that will help you sort of lay that out. But I want you just to start thinking about that now. Then you want to look at the objectives. How are we going to solve that, right? What things are going to happen? What methods are going to be put in place that will allow us to host these activities, whatever those activities are? In Frank's case, it may be, the workshop, that opportunity to come together, that exchange of information. It might be as simple as we will, one of the objectives is that all the seniors who participate will share their phone numbers with one another, and that will work toward lessening the isolation, engaging in more, opportunities to talk about the things they have in common, et cetera, et cetera. And again, Frank, I'm kind of making some stuff up here, so we'll just kind of go with that idea. But then you move into the activities. What specifically is going to happen? And we'll talk about things like the timeline and how we lay all of that out. And then finally, we think about the results, okay? And when we do these things, what's going to change? And in our next session together, we're actually going to look at a logic model, which is a tool that we can help really lay out what are the initial changes, or what we call outputs. Initially we get 15 people who have not, been connected in a community to come to the first workshop or the first session. That might be an initial result of that activity. What are the outcomes? That's a little longer. That's usually more of a measurement, and as a result, they've returned, this same 15 people have come to 8 different activities. They've gone out together, and they've reported in a 6-month survey that they no longer feel isolated, or they feel less isolated than they did before coming to this program, right? That's more of an outcome. You start getting into, how am I going to prove that what we're doing is working? Make sense? And then finally, that bigger, longer term impact is this whole idea of change. And I want to look at one more slide before we jump back into your table discussion, so to speak, in really looking and understanding impact. We use the term impact a lot in nonprofits, and we mean a lot of different things by it. So what I want to do is give you sort of a formula that helps you understand what we as funders are looking for when we say impact, what exactly it is that we are looking for. And to do this, I want to jump into when we think about a problem or a challenge. Let's take this middle one. Let's think we're an organization that needs a new server because we're not able, our server and our technology is just not keeping pace with today's, donation strategies or anything like that. But that's not really the problem, right? That's actually the solution that you're proposing. So we've got to take a couple of steps back to truly understand impact. We have to first understand that internal need. In this case, it's that there's older technology, which may have a higher risk of getting hacked or of data being breached. And maybe we're a family services organization, so families are less excited or less interested in coming in and sharing their personal information because there's a higher risk of, that information being hacked because the technology is not as strong, right? Okay, there's a problem that is impacting the services and impacting the broader community, right? And so what we're going to do about that is find a way to update our data security and protect that personal information that's being shared, okay? That comes to that initial solution of we need a new server because the new server is going to help us do those things, right? But then the impact of that, and this is what a lot of times we miss in our own storytelling, is what's going to change. Well, if families are more comfortable and willing to share their information with their caseworkers, that perhaps in this case is going to support the child's, the treatment that they're getting. Maybe it is the cancer treatment that they're getting, or maybe it's, maybe it's some other sort of after school programming, whatever it is. If they're more comfortable providing the data that the caseworkers need to continue to provide strong services for the children and the families, then that is going to mean more children are coming, more children are getting the services that they need. That's what's really changing, right? So when we think of impact, I encourage you to use it in your own mind to think about that as the big change, right? That first example, we may need somebody that's going to be doing some fundraising. Maybe the organization has gotten to the point where there's more demand for services than there is money to provide it. So we've come to that realization that we're going to have to hire someone who is a development professional who can do that work to allow us to do what we need to do. So you've got to back that up and understand the problem, the demand for our services has grown. Then the action is that we've got to get more money in the door in order to be able to meet that demand. The solution is we're going to hire somebody to do that. And that change means that we're going to have fewer people on the wait list. We're going to have more people getting the services that they need, whatever that looks like. Again, that could be that cancer care. That could be that more people getting opportunities to participate in the theater activities, whatever it may be, that allows more of those needs to be met. Do you see how sort of thinking about the impact in those 4 steps can help you clarify it? All right, then here's what I'm going to give you an opportunity to do. I'm going to put you back in the breakout rooms, and I'm going to give you 15 minutes this time. And what I want you to do is pick one organization, one volunteer that you're going to work with, and I want you to work as a group on defining these key things, right? This list of who they serve, what challenge or problem they face, why that's a problem in the community. What you'll have to skip this one because we don't know for sure necessarily what funder you're thinking of, so don't worry about that final. But these 3 pieces, what's something that they can do about it, right? And even maybe talking through a few of these strategies. And ultimately, what's the impact? Now, don't worry, I'll put all this in the chat too. As soon as you get into your groups, I'll do that so that you've got sort of the outline. And then that way, you're using one organization. You're going to go through that whole conversation with the organization, kind of like we just did with Frank. And you're going to think about, help kind of think through that process. All right. Are there any questions about what I'm asking you to do in your groups? You may get a couple of new people to the group that weren't part of it when we first started this. So give everybody a chance to say hello. And then you'll dive into that. We'll put it in the chat for you, those key steps, so that you know what you're working through. And then we'll come back together in, I have 11:26, so it'll probably be close to, let's see, well, to do the 15 minutes, probably be close to 11:40. And so we'll come back together at that time. One of the questions is this one of our organizations or a well-known? Yes, let's use one of yours, right? Let's make this as personal as somebody's willing to be. So that's why I say just choose one that somebody's willing to kind of work with the group on, and then you'll do that. Other questions, Frank?
Yeah, so you want us to do the need, the action, solution, and the impact for one of the organizations?
Yeah, just talk through as much of that as you can get through, okay. So that you've had practice in kind of working through that process.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? I am seeing and hearing none, so I am going to put you back in your with your friends. And give you a chance to work through this. If somebody in the group has a question, come back out to the main room. We'll be here, and I can either join your group or, I can answer your question for you. You just, as you're getting together, you'll have to give me just a second to get this information in the chat for you. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So my big question to you after that is not what situation did you work on, but what was it like to work with others on that? What was that experience like? I got a thumbs up from Liz. All right, and Fabio as well. Great, thanks.
My group was very empowering and supportive, and just not only encouraged the things that I'm doing, but mentioned how we can work together and that we all have overlap and commonalities, and how our services can and do complement each other in different avenues.
Yeah. It is funny. I always say nonprofit work is the most people-focused but isolated work, in that we, even within organizations, sometimes we're so focused on our piece that we don't even always get the opportunity or take the opportunity just to reach out to those around us who could also, chat with us, through some of these experiences. So I love that you had that experience. It's one of the reasons I like to do this type of activity, is to help you start to build, that network of colleagues who do get it. They don't have to know your mission inside and out to be resourceful, and you can really be supportive of each other. There is, in some communities, there is a real competitive feel in the nonprofit space. And, while I completely understand it, at the end of the day, certainly at the Community Foundation of Broward, we want to fund you all. And we grant out between $16 and $19 million a year. So we really, the collective is going to be better than just one here and there. So I would encourage you not to be afraid to chat together. You giving support to another nonprofit is not going to take away your chance of getting that funding, because the best thing we get to do is go back to our donors and our board and say, we have more strong applications doing work we need to have happen in this community than we have funds to give, and let them help us get more funds, right? So there is a finite amount of money, true. That competitiveness is not necessary for us all to be successful. So I hope you will continue to stay in touch with one another, beyond the terms of the class. We can even, after the next time, if there's interest, we can send out a list of everybody that's participating. If that's something you would like not to be a part of, you can let us know. But otherwise, we could send out, so you can stay in touch with one another. So know that we're happy to do that for you. So I'm glad that many of you found that helpful. And I want to get in just the last couple of things for our time together today. Can you see the screen okay? Give me a thumbs up. Yep. All right. I'm seeing it. Awesome. The last piece of this, and this is really what we'll dive into the next time, both into more of that identifying your solution and how you build that story and the aspects of that work, and the process, the how piece, right? This is how, not only what do we want to be able to do to provide the solution, but how is it going to happen? And these are those key components for that how, that not only do you have a really good idea, you're strong in the problem, you're strong in the solution, but we have a plan. And the more details you can put into that plan, the better, the more confident a funder is going to feel in your ability to carry that plan out, right? And that includes things like a timeline, and we'll look at examples of that next time. Strong partnerships and collaborations, and definitions of what that might look like as you move forward. That a strong budget of, if you want, how is that money going to be spent? And have you thought about that? And I will say that we do realize that when you're proposing this sort of a plan, particularly the budget aspect of it, that you are proposing it, right? That it may edit, you may have some edits when you get there, because you're probably 6 months out from doing the program and getting the funding. So once you start to put that in place, in 6 months, some things might change a little bit. You plan to spend, I don't know, $30 per participant to come through a program, and it turns out it's going to take 35. Or you plan to have 42 participants, and it turns out you ended up with 38. Those kinds of things we know happen. So don't let budgeting scare you to think it won't, what if it doesn't happen exactly like we lay it out? We know that. In fact, I can almost guarantee you it almost never goes exactly as planned, start to finish. But that's okay. We just want to know from your timeline and your budget and your process pieces that you have a plan to work through that process, right? What are you going to do to evaluate it? How will you know whatever it is you're proposing to us is successful? And we're going to show you some resources that help with, we call them evaluation indicators or success indicators. We're going to show you how to do that in our next session together. And then finally, how will the program continue forward, right? So another little insider tip, The answer to that is not, we will ask you for a grant next year, right? Now, that's not to say that's not part of the plan, right? But that should not be your only answer to sustain a program, right? In fact, we probably, if it's a good program, we want you to come back and ask us for more money next year. We probably want to stay involved in it. But what we want you to be realistic about is, how will this continue? You know, what other funders might we bring on board? What other fundraising strategies might we bring, you know, might we employ? What other is there a fee for service process that you might eventually undertake that would be part of this sustainability? So we're looking for that kind of information. And all those pieces and parts really help us understand and feel confident in your ability to carry out this proposed project. And so you want that to be as well thought through as it can be. And my encouragement to you is to use each other in that process. You know, let others read through how you're putting things together and provide suggestions and tips. That can be a really, really strong resource. And in fact, if you're not familiar, there is a national organization called Grant Professionals Association, GPA. They have a local chapter here in Florida, in South Florida. And they meet monthly. They have all kinds of meetings and you know, help each other review applications and that kind of thing. So if that's something that you're interested in, we can get more information to you about that as well in our next session together. And finally, as we really kind of think about and come to the end of our time together here today, what I want to do is really review this sort of formula to build a strong proposal. And ultimately, it comes down to providing that problem, really defining and clarifying what that problem or challenge is. In addition, you know, you're thinking about who it is and what those issues are and how that impacts the community. You add that to the solution that you're providing to help address whatever challenge it is you've identified. You're demonstrating what an impact that will have if that all carries out and you get the funding to do it. And what that turns into is the bones of a fundable proposal. So making sure that your organization is ready and putting all these pieces and parts in place help you build that proposal. And that is exactly what we're going to get into in our next session together, is what it takes to take an idea and turn it into a proposal now that you're ready. So my challenge to you as you go through this next couple of weeks between now and our next session, is to work on that readiness. Use that little checklist and that little STAR document to say, all right, these are the places we're strong. These are the places I need more information, and see where you can get. And then we'll come back together and actually meet in pairs to talk a little bit about that. And then spend a little time reviewing that defining your need, thinking about your solutions and defining that why piece. And bring your idea to the next session, something that you'd like to get some funding to do, whatever that might be. You might have several ideas. You might have a whole big long list. So I'd encourage you just to pick one for now. And we'll actually walk through the process of developing that into a proposal idea. And we'll do that next together on October the 2nd. Then after that, you'll be working together or working through strengthening that proposal idea. And we'll come together on October the 16th and do what we just call a proposal training camp. And this is really, we're going to use the Community Foundation of Broward application. We're going to walk you through every step of that process so that you will know exactly what's expected on an application. And the other thing that we'll do for that is we're actually going to bring in our grants team. So you will get to meet at least some of the members of our grants team who will walk through a lot of that process and be available to answer any questions that you have. So we don't want that to be a mystery. We don't want that to be a super secret thing. We want you to know exactly who's working on that process for the foundation and be able to ask them any questions that you may have. So that is our plan. As far as will it be the same link or a new one? I think it's the same Zoom link, right, Lavani? We'll send out an updated reminder And we'll be sure it does have the right link. So we'll make sure that you have that. And we will look forward to being with all of you again on October the 2nd at 9 a.m. You do not have to re-register. If you've registered for one, you're set for the series. So I believe we've got you down. If we find out differently, we'll reach out to you directly. But we'll look forward to seeing all of you on October the 2nd. And thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for providing this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you
Thank
guys
you.
so
Glad
much.
to
This
do
was
it.
so much good information. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you
very much. Thank you.
Glad to see you all, and we'll hang around if there are any specific questions, but otherwise we'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Have a good
It's a
one.
pleasure. Great to see you, Fabio.